Colorado Territory, December 1871. The snow came in sharp, sideways sheets, stinging Olivia Tamer's cheeks as she pressed forward through the blinding white. Her boots sank deep with every step, skirts dragging heavy behind her. The wind howled across the open range. No trees, no fences, just endless white. Her numb fingers clutched tighter to the reins of the exhausted mule behind her, its breathing ragged. She had knocked on 3 doors that day. 3 ranch houses, 3 refusals. No room. No charity here. Keep walking, woman. The last one had stared through her like she was already dead. The snow had started falling harder after that. She had not cried. Not when the preacher's wife turned her away, not when her mule stumbled and nearly collapsed. But now, as the sun fell behind the mountains and the cold started to burn, Olivia felt the tears building behind her eyes. She wiped them away roughly. She could not afford them. She rounded a low hill and saw a barn. Weathered red wood, half covered in snow, smoke rising from a nearby house chimney. She hesitated. One more door, one more chance. She dragged her feet through the snow, left the mule near the barn entrance, and staggered to the house. Her knuckles were raw from the last knock, but she raised her hand again. The door opened before she could touch it. A tall man stood in the frame, backlit by the flicker of firelight. His coat was unbuttoned, his hair damp with snow, and his eyes deep, steady, the color of dark river rock locked onto her face. "Lord," he said, stepping forward, "you are about frozen." "I just need shelter for the night," Olivia said, voice shaking. "I will work for it." "I do not need a handout." He looked past her to the mule. "You and that animal are not going to make it another hour out there." "Come in," he said firmly. "I will get the barn ready. You can warm up inside first." "I do not want charity," she said again, barely above a whisper. "This is not charity," the man replied. "This is decency." He stepped aside. She stared at him a beat longer, then stepped into the warmth. The door shut behind her. The man moved to the hearth and tossed on another log. "I am Ridge Callahan," he said without looking at her. "You can sit there." "I will bring quilts." "Olivia," she said quietly. "Olivia Tamer." He nodded once, then disappeared down the hall. When he returned, he handed her 2 thick blankets and a pair of dry wool socks. "Your hands," he said. She hesitated, then held them out. He took them gently, rubbing warmth back into her fingers with slow, careful movements. She stared at his face, square jaw, a faint scar beneath the left eye, brow tense with concern. "You walked far?" he asked. She nodded. 20 miles. I lost the wagon 2 days ago." "I have no family left." He did not ask more, just nodded again and said, "You will sleep in the barn where the heat from the livestock will keep it warm. I will fix you a cot." She stood, legs shaking. "I can help. You have done enough," Ridge said softly. "Let me do this." Outside, the storm had not let up. Ridge led her across to the barn, a lantern in one hand, the other holding her elbow steady. Inside, the barn was warm with the breath of horses and hay. He led her to a clean stall where he laid out a cot, extra quilts, and a small oil stove. "You will be safe here," he said. She looked up at him, eyes glassy from the sudden change in luck. "Thank you." He gave a small nod, then turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Some folks forget how to be human in weather like this," Ridge said without turning. "I never learned how." Then he was gone. By morning, the storm had buried half the barn in snow. Olivia woke stiff but alive. When she opened the stall door, Ridge was already there, feeding the horses. "You sleep all right?" he asked. She nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." He handed her a tin mug of coffee. "Still snowed in. You are stuck here a while. I can help," she said. "I know how to mend, cook, clean." "You can help," he agreed, "but only after you rest." She watched him work, quiet and steady, every movement deliberate. He noticed her watching and gave a short, knowing look. "You are not the first woman to come through these hills needing shelter," he said, "but you are the first one who came through a blizzard on foot." "I had nowhere else to go," she admitted. He nodded. "You do now." The days passed. The storm never let up, but inside the barn and house, something quiet bloomed. Olivia worked beside Ridge, milking the cow, mending tack, cooking meals in the low-lit kitchen. She laughed once at something he said, dry humor, but it caught her off guard. Ridge looked startled when she laughed, like he had not heard it in years. One evening, she found him in the barn, fixing a broken saddle strap. She handed him a fresh cup of coffee. "You are good with your hands," she said. He looked up at her. "You notice everything." "I notice when someone does not look away when I speak," she said. "Most men do." "I am not most men," Ridge said evenly. "I know." He set the coffee aside and looked at her fully. "You do not flinch when I raise my voice. You do not ask for more than you need. You do not pretend to be someone else." Her breath caught. "I do not know how to pretend anymore." He reached for her hand, held it gently. "Then do not." She stood still in the warm barn, the scent of hay and leather around them, and let his calloused palm wrap around hers. They did not kiss that night, but her hand stayed in his, and it was enough to start something real. The snow gave way to a brittle calm, the kind that settled over the high country once the wind had spent itself. Ridge stood at the edge of the paddock, hammering slats back into place on the fence while steam curled from the horse's flanks behind him. Olivia approached with a wool scarf wrapped close to her throat, her breath rising in soft clouds. "I found a cracked kettle in the attic," she said, holding it up. "Might be worth patching." He set the hammer down and took the kettle from her hands, turning it slowly. "My mother used this one. She boiled wild mint in it when my sister got the fever." "Did she survive?" "No," he said, voice even. "But the mint helped her breathe easier at the end." Olivia didn't offer sorrow. She only nodded once and looked out past the fence line where the drifts had settled into smooth white ridges. "You were the youngest, middle. My brother fought at Shiloh, never came home." She glanced at him. "You stayed behind. I was 16 when they rode off. My father made me promise to keep the land standing." "Did you want to go?" "I wanted to do a lot of things," he said, then looked at her. "But promises stick longer than want." She brushed her thumb over the kettle's dented side. "I promised my husband I'd keep moving west. He thought there'd be work in the mining camps. He didn't come with you. He died outside Wichita. Fever took him before we made it out of Kansas." Ridge didn't speak. He took the kettle back toward the house, gesturing for her to follow. Inside, the light through the windows had turned golden, slanting long across the floorboards. Olivia sat at the table while Ridge filled a basin and set the kettle inside to soak. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "After the war ended, I rode south for a season. Thought maybe I'd take freight for the army." "What changed your mind?" "My father died that spring. I came back to bury him. Then the cattle needed tending. Then the fences needed mending. Time passed." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Rough hands and short words. "You've got both, but you look a person in the eye when you speak." He leaned back against the sink, arms crossed. "You don't flinch when you talk about death." "There's been too much to flinch from." He nodded slowly. "I've got a neighbor 3 ridges over. Older woman, Cherokee. She weaves and trades for what she can't grow. I was thinking if you're staying come spring, she might teach you what she knows." Olivia turned her face toward the window. "You think I'll still be here come spring?" "I think you could be." She looked back at him. His expression was unreadable, but not closed. She studied the line of his jaw, how the shadows caught in his collarbone. "I've never stayed anywhere longer than a season," she said. "You might find staying isn't the same thing as giving up." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. I wouldn't know what to call it if I did. He pushed off the sink and walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. Call it yours if it feels right. The door creaked as it opened, letting in the scent of thawing wood and horses. Olivia sat still long after he left, the kettle cooling beside her, her hand resting on its rim like it might anchor her to the floor. Outside, the snow had begun to melt in slow rivulets along the eaves. Ridge moved along the fence line, checking posts, his figure steady in the slanted light. And still, she did not rise. Not yet. But something inside her had begun to settle, like a bird considering a branch it might land on if the wind held. By mid-January, the roads out of the valley were still impassable, but the days had lengthened just enough for Ridge to ride out before dusk and return with sacks of feed or salt pork slung over the saddle. Olivia had taken to writing inventory in the ledger Ridge rarely touched, her handwriting tight and slanted, each letter pressed with care. That morning, she'd found him sharpening a draw knife in the shed, sawdust clinging to his boots. She stood in the doorway, arms folded under her shawl. You building something? He didn't look up. Cabin wood starting to rot under the eaves, needs new siding. You'll cut all that by hand. I've done worse. She stepped inside, the air thick with cedar shavings. Would you mind if I helped? He paused. You ever split boards? No. But I've watched close enough to learn. He handed her the spare draw knife without another word. She settled beside him on the bench, and they worked in silence, the rhythm of the blades carving steady music into the morning. Later, she sat on the porch stairs, sleeves rolled, fingers aching. Ridge emerged from the barn with a coil of rope over his shoulder. You've got grit, he said, easing down beside her. I was raised on river soil. Nothing grew easy there either. He tilted his head, curious. Where was that? Western Missouri. My father leased land near the Chariton. We grew barley till the soil turned sour. You ever want to go back? I used to think I did. But the land wasn't the same once the rails came through, and no one I knew stayed put. Ridge's gaze settled on the snow-covered ridge in the distance. You think the land keeps its memory? I think it remembers who bled into it. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and old ash. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My mother was part Kickapoo, he said. She never talked much about it, but she kept a medicine pouch under her pillow. After she passed, I buried it with her. Olivia rested her chin in her hand. You ever feel caught between things? Not quite one, not quite the other, he gave a quiet breath. Every day. She looked at him then, really looked. You let people assume what they want, don't you? He didn't answer right away. Then, it's easier than correcting them, her voice softened. You don't owe anyone that silence. He turned toward her. You're the first person who's ever said that. She met his eyes. Then they weren't looking hard enough. That evening, she cooked venison over the hearth while Ridge set kindling for the morning. The fire crackled low, shadows flickering across the plank walls. When she brought him a plate, he set it down untouched and stood slowly. I've been thinking, he said. About spring, she waited. There's land down by the creek, flat enough to plant, if someone wanted to start a garden or raise chickens. Her throat tightened. Why are you telling me that? Because you're not passing through anymore. She stepped closer, the hem of her skirt brushing his boot. You sure? I've never been more. They stood in the hush between words, the kind that stretched whole and sacred. And when she reached for him, he didn't flinch, just let her hand settle over his heart like it had always belonged there. He bent his head. She rose to meet him. Their first kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't fragile. It was quiet and deep, like a thaw running under ice, a promise warmer than fire. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and slow, as if the land itself had exhaled. The creek thawed slow and dark. its banks lined with last year's husks and the fresh green of new shoots. Ridge stood knee-deep in the water, boots off, pants rolled to the knee, coaxing a felled log across the current with a long pole. Olivia watched from the bank, her skirts pinned up, a length of rope looped around her shoulder. "You sure it won't split?" she called. He steadied the pole against the current. "If it does, it wasn't worth building with." She crouched by the pile of stones they dredged from the field days before, sorting the smoothest ones into a basket. She'd taken to stacking them outside the barn, shaping rough borders for a garden bed. The air carried the scent of thawed soil and wet cedar, and her hands were stained with earth clear to the wrists. He dragged the log up the embankment, breath low and even. She rose to help, slipping her hands beneath the damp bark. Together, they pulled it into place. "Another like that, and we've got enough for the lean-to," she said. He looked down at her fingers, raw at the knuckles. "You're working too hard." "I don't mind it," she said. "It's honest." He rubbed his palms clean on his trousers, then picked up a hatchet from the stump nearby. "Honest's one thing. Wearing yourself down's another." She glanced toward the house. "I've been thinking about the back room." "What about it?" "It gets the best light in the morning. I could turn it into a sewing corner, maybe take in mending for the neighboring spreads." He paused, then nodded. "You'd earn well. Folks around here are hard on their clothes." "I'd like to earn something that's mine," she said. The wind lifted her hair, strands catching on her cheek. Ridge reached out and tucked them behind her ear, his touch rough from weeks of cold work, but careful. "You already have," he said quietly. "Every stone in that garden, every board you've helped plane, every meal you've set down." Her eyes didn't move from his. "That's ours. I want something with my name on it." He let his hand fall. "Then we'll build that too." That night, while Ridge carved a brace for the tool rack, she sat at the table with needle and thread, patching a torn saddle blanket. The fire snapped low and the dogs lay stretched at the hearth, their bodies rising and falling with sleep. "You plan on staying through summer?" Ridge asked without looking up. "I'm not leaving," she said, threading the needle again. "Not unless you ask me to." He set the brace down. "I wouldn't." She nodded once, then returned to her work. After a long while, he rose and crossed to her. She looked up, her hand stilling. He held out a folded square of paper. "What's this?" "Deed to the parcel by the creek," he said. "It's yours." She opened it slowly, her breath catching. "You put it in my name." "I did." "Why?" He lowered himself into the chair beside her. "Because I don't want you to build your life on something borrowed. If you're going to stay, you stay as yourself, whole." She stared at the paper, then at him. "You trust me that much?" "I love you," he said. Her lips parted, but no sound came. "You don't have to say it back," he added. "I just needed you to know." She folded the paper, laid it gently on the table. "I was always going to say it first. You just beat me." He reached for her hand, resting it between both of his. She leaned into him, forehead against his. "I've never had a thing last," she whispered. "You do now." Outside, the wind passed through the cottonwoods, soft as breath through linen. And inside, two people who had once known only absence sat close, hands clasped, the warmth between them no longer borrowed but built. The roof was finished before the last frost lifted from the valley. Ridge stood back, arms folded as Olivia climbed down from the crate she'd been using to reach the eaves. She brushed sawdust from her skirt, cheeks flushed from the climb. "You said it would hold," she said, glancing up at the new boards. "It will." "You set every nail straight." She looked toward the field, where early greens had begun to push through. "I was thinking we could set poles for beans along the fence. The soil's loose enough now." He nodded, but his gaze lingered on her face, not the field. She stepped closer. "What is it?" He shifted his weight. "I had a letter come through the post yesterday, from the land office up in Leadville." Her brow drew. Is there trouble? No, more like a chance. He handed her a folded sheet. They're offering up contracts for timber cutting up near the Blue River. Said they need someone local to help manage the crew, someone with land, tools, and a steady hand. Olivia read the letter slowly, lips pressed tight. How long would you be gone? Not long. 3 weeks at most. But I'd have to leave before the end of the month. She looked at the barn, the stacked planting baskets, the rows of half-finished fence. That's planting season. I know, he said, which is why I won't go if you should go. He blinked. You sure? I didn't come here to keep you from your life, Ridge. I came to build something with you. If this helps us grow something steadier, then go. He studied her expression, the set of her jaw, the way she didn't blink even once. Then he stepped forward and took her face in his hands. I'll be back before the creek swells, he said, and I'll bring back enough to finish the cabin and then some. She leaned into him. You better bring back yourself first. They spent the next few days in rhythm, laying out seeds, turning soil, hauling water from the well. Olivia took to marking each row with small carved stakes Ridge had whittled by the fire. She carved the names herself: corn, onion, carrot, pressing each letter with a care that felt close to prayer. The morning he left, he saddled his gelding in the hush before dawn. Olivia stood at the gate, shawl pulled close, arms crossed against her ribs. I left a list of the tool sheds that need mending, he said. I already checked them. He smiled, soft at the edges. I know. She stepped close and pressed something into his palm. For the trip, he opened his hand. A small pouch sewn from the sleeve of her old coat, filled with dried rose hips and willow bark. For your bones, she said, and for luck. He closed his hand around it. You've already given me more than luck. He leaned down and kissed her long and deep, the cold rising off the earth, the silence of the valley wrapping around them like wool. Then he mounted and rode out slow, not looking back until he hit the ridge, where he lifted one hand before disappearing over the rise. The days passed in steady rhythm. Olivia rose before sunup, fed the animals, turned soil, and set trap lines along the creek for rabbit. At night, she mended canvas and read aloud from Ridge's books, her voice filling the space he'd left behind. Each evening she marked his absence in the ledger, a small line drawn above the date. On the 16th day, a storm rolled through, shaking the shutters loose and snapping a branch clean off the cottonwood out front. Olivia spent the night in the barn, soothing the horses and checking the roof for leaks. When daylight broke, the air had turned warm, sweet with earth and thaw. She was planting bean seeds when she heard hooves on the road. By the time Ridge reached the gate, she dropped the basket and was already running. He dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. She reached him breathless, dirt still on her hands, and threw her arms around his neck. He caught her, lifting her clear off the ground. You're early, she said into his collar. I couldn't stay gone, he murmured. They stood there, wrapped tight, the wind stirring the hem of her dress and the tails of his coat. Later inside, he set down a wrapped bundle beside the fire. What's that? She asked. Tools. Good ones. And a hand-stitched quilt from a Kiowa woman near the timber camp. She said it was for the woman who made me walk like I had somewhere to be. Olivia unfolded the quilt, fingers running over the stitching. It's beautiful. So are you, Ridge said, voice low. She looked up, eyes shining. I missed you. I miss the way you stir stew with your whole arm, he said. I miss the sound you make when you read something funny. I miss the way you fall asleep before the fire's gone cold. She stepped into him. I love you. He kissed her slow, his hand sliding to the small of her back. Then stay. For good. I already have. They married under the cottonwood just as the buds began to open. Ridge carved their initials into the trunk, and Olivia pressed her hand to the fresh mark until the sap bled warm. The neighbors came, bringing bread and dried apples, and the woman from the next ridge over wrapped Olivia's shoulders in a blue shawl stitched with cornflower thread. Ridge built her a sewing table by the window. She planted chamomile near the porch, and by summer the bees had found it. The nights were spent shoulder to shoulder, quiet words exchanged in the dark, the kind that didn't need answering. And when the first frost returned to the valley, they were still there tending rows gone gold and brown, stacking wood beneath the lean-to, watching the sun set behind the distant ridge, together. Always.